Hey, this is Professor Game, where we interview successful practitioners of games, gamification, and game thinking who bring us the best of their experiences to get ideas, insights, and inspiration that help us in the process of getting the students to learn what we teach. And I'm Rob Alvarez. I work at IE Business School Publishing, where we create interactive and engaging learning materials. Do you have something you'd like some help with? Ask our guests. Go to professorgame.com/question and get your question answered in a future episode. Engagers, today we have an educator. We have Chris Aviles. And Chris, the first question, we always like to make sure that our guests are ready for this interview and to engage with our engagers. So, are you prepared to engage?
I am ready to launch.
Let's do this. Chris is the 21st Century Skills, Technology, and Innovation Coordinator for the Fair Haven School District in Fair Haven, New Jersey, where he runs the renowned Fair Haven Innovates program that he created in 2015. And there's many interesting things that we're going to talk about today related to all these things that you've been doing. So, Chris, is there anything that we missed in that intro that we just made?
Yeah, my title sounds kind of fancy, but I'm a public school classroom teacher. I spend, my entire day teaching kids, and I have some summer responsibilities, so that's where the special title comes in.
The superpowers that you're granted for doing all those things that you do.
Exactly.
That's fantastic. So, Chris, let's get started with the first question that we'd like to make to get a little bit more personal with you guys, to get to know that you are also, all the gamification experts, practitioners are actually normal people, and in your case are normal teachers as well. So we would like to know, what does a regular day with Chris typically look like?
Yeah, so get up, put 2 feet on the ground, I head to school. My morning is I have 3 classes in a row when I first get here. And what I love about my morning classes is that my kids and I run real businesses together. My 6th grade class, we do product design. We try to sell the solutions to people's problems. My 7th grade class is agriculture meets technology. And we sell a lot of our herbs and our produce to local restaurants and parents in town. And anything we can't sell, we donate to our local soup kitchen. And then my 8th grade class is a business incubator, where students could choose to grow their own business, grow a local business, or they could grow their community by doing an impact project. And then I get about an hour to relax and get some lunch and prepare for my afternoon. And my afternoon is a makerspace, which you might find interesting. My schedule is a bit tough for my afternoon classes. I see my kids once every 6 days, my 4th and 5th graders, on a 6-day rotation. And so what I'm trying out this year is I have designed 1-hour challenges for them to complete while they're with me. And these challenges range from computer science to engineering to the digital arts. And I went to this 1-hour format because I had them doing multi-week projects last year, but a lot of my guys forgot, what they were doing, or they kind of had lost interest by the next time I saw them in the cycle. And so I designed these 1-hour challenges. And as I was designing these 1-hour challenges, I couldn't shake the feeling that it felt like a game show to me. So I actually now teach my 4th and 5th grade afternoon classes as if they were on a game show. There's a whole big, intro song, and I do the whole intro. I'm the host, and today's contestants on the we call the show The Constraint, and they have to do these design thinking projects over the course of an hour. So a lot of really fun stuff that I implemented this year that I'm enjoying.
Wow, sounds like a super exciting and filled with things that you have. So you were saying that you have several grades that you're teaching. Do you have several sections, or is it just one group of students?
So I see my 6th through 8th graders. I see them on a semester base. And so really my class falls under, I guess, the technology special. But I try to bring in a lot of stuff to engage the kids. And then my 4th and 5th graders in the afternoon, it's part of their special rotation. So they'll see me in art and music and phys ed and health, kind of like the usual American setup for the younger guys. So not necessarily different sections. I do wind up seeing every kid in the school.
It sounds very, very exciting. And the entrepreneurial twist that your subjects have is something I definitely love personally. So cheers to that day, and I'm sure you're very excited about it every time you wake up and go to school.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
So Chris, we just described a fantastic day with Chris, and I'm sure many engagers are thinking that this guy has it all figured out. He always has, and that these things just work phenomenally. But we also help our engagers and our audience and the people who are out there starting or thinking of starting by letting them know that it's not always been rainbows and unicorns and everything is going perfect. So the first story that we would like for you to tell us, Chris, is a story of actually a failure, of a first attempt in learning, or when creating a gamified situation for your student, or some gamification that actually maybe set you for learning, for future success, whatever way you wanna frame it.
Yeah, I mean, and I'll tell you, kind of to address that first part that you mentioned, I'm going into, this will be, my 7th year, I think, using different game mechanics in my classrooms. I taught high school English for 10 years. I've been in my current district. This is my 4th year. So I've used it, all the way from 4th to seniors. And I'm constantly always changing things. And I think, reframing failure as iteration and understanding that you're in a constant feedback loop. Like, I'll even give you an example right from today. Again, it's not that I necessarily think it's a failure, but I think that there's feedback loops. Their challenge, my 4th and 5th grade challenge today, was to design a balloon-powered car. And I noticed, because I called it a car, their final designs all look the same. And so when my 5th graders came in, I very quickly edited the slide to, instead of say car, I said vehicle. And then I got cars, I got sleds, I got airplanes, right? I got a lot more diverse final products just by tweaking the words. And that's the kind of stuff that I'm constantly doing, sometimes from class to class, from day to day, definitely year to year. And so I think that, I absolutely, of course, celebrate that first attempt in learning. But I think if we start to frame what we're doing as feedback loops, and understanding that there is always better ways to tackle things, to me, I get more mileage out of that. To answer the second part of your question, probably I guess we'll call it the biggest failure that I used when I first started gamifying, or the biggest failure that I had, was that I created an unfair gamification system. And so going back, 7 years ago, I turned my classroom, my high school English classroom, into a video game. And I did that because I had I had learners that were not very motivated. But I noticed that my relationships with my kids, most of it was based around video games. We were talking about what game was out, what game I was playing, what game they were playing. And so the more I, started to think about video games, I started thinking of video games as a teaching tool. The more into gamification I got, until I finally made the jump into turning my classroom into a video game. But when I first started out, part of my system is I do something called achievements. Achievements are completely unrelated to schoolwork, but when a kid completes a heroic deed or displays a heroic trait, I like to reward those achievements. And so when you start to think about that, one that teachers commonly want to do, and I was one of them, was to make some sort of achievement that rewarded kids for helping. And the problem that you have with things like helping and being nice is they are not concrete, measurable metrics. And so the beautiful thing about a video game is, whether you're gay or straight or Jewish, Christian, Muslim, rich or poor, the rules are the same for everybody. But when I was trying to give out these achievements to kids for being helpful and being nice, this kid was nice for 5 minutes, this kid was nice for 10 minutes, this kid helped, more than that kid, but that kid helped better than that kid did in a longer period of time. And I was trying to reward something that was not concrete. And so that very quickly kind of turned on me, because kids started to get mad, and it usually always comes down to the same thing. Why a lot of our students are mad is that's because they feel like they're being treated unfairly. So I actually had to kind of hit a whole reset button. And I do something, that I think we could do better as educators. And that was, I apologized to my kids. I said, guys, I'm trying something new. I really kind of screwed this up. We're going to kind of reboot, and here's what it's going to look like. And so, I had gone back to the drawing board, and I thought, okay, well, what does helping really look like? And so, I'm reminded of a quick story. Is I had one of my favorite kids I ever taught. she came in and she had this big cut on her arm. And she came in and the blood was dripping. I looked at her. I like panicked. I tried to call the main office, but hit the wrong buttons. And then she just starts laughing because she had made like this gory cut on her arm in art class. She used makeup and paper mache and some paint. And, that's because what she wanted most in life was to be like a movie special effects artist and stuff like that. And the reason she had made that big cut is because I had asked my kids to remake an Edgar Allan Poe story into a modern movie. And so they had a month to, film these movies and stuff like that. And then we would have like a little, screening festival. But I told her, I said, we got to get your classmates when they come in. So she went back out and they came in and she came in screaming and they all freaked out. And then we both laughed at our kids. But what was amazing is I watched her after, everything kind of died down and all the group said, hey, would you come and do our movie makeup for our movie? And I watched this girl fill up like 4 Saturdays of her free time to go do this makeup for other groups that, there was no grade for her for helping other groups. There was nothing other than that was what she was passionate about. And so that's, that was kind of the moment I realized what helping looked like. And so I would make these little achievements and I handed them out digitally or I made little baseball card versions of them. But imagine a picture of Liam Neeson and it said on the bottom, I have a certain set of skills that can make me, a nightmare for people like you. And the achievement was called Taken. And on the back or, on the electronic version, it basically said, you were selected because you have a certain set of skills. And that's when I realized that's what helping was, is my kids would go talk to the kid who knows how to code and ask for help. My kid would go talk to, somebody. I had a couple kids that were published in like teen magazines because they were really into writing. And kids would ask those kids for help. Can you read my work and stuff like that? And so when a kid was taken for possessing a certain talent, a certain set of skills, they unlocked that Taken achievement. And so it took me probably a good 6 months to realize why gamification wasn't necessarily clicking in that sense in the beginning. And that's because they were frustrated that they were trying to help each other, being nice to each other, all things that we want our kids to do, be a good teammate. But I wasn't measuring it the right way and I wasn't acknowledging it in a way that a video game works. And, a lot of what I do now, I think it's zeros and ones, did this happen or did it not happen? And if it did, or did not, it makes it a lot easier to acknowledge as using gamification.
Definitely, and there's many key learnings that we could take from Chris. And something I didn't mention is that Chris is also known as the teched up teacher. So if you're looking for, he's mentioned technology quite a few times. So he's one of those sought after teachers that knows a lot about tech. So this teched up teacher had all this big challenge because he didn't realize some things, and that's when his learning came in. And one of them is definitely, something I really like to take away is that you acknowledge that you had done something that you did not come out as you expected. And it's, I think you taught them many more things just by saying that you were sorry, that you did screw up, and admitting it openly and letting them know that that is okay and that can happen. But that, of course, if you do something wrong, the best thing and the first thing that you need to do is apologize and say, this is not gonna happen again. I'm gonna try something new. We're gonna try something different, and I'm not gonna do this. And I think the learning they got from that was massive. And of course, how you framed and the whole thing about how to measure the success in your gamification is fundamental, definitely for such a case.
Mm-hmm. It wound up working really well eventually, but it took probably, I'd say, 2 to 2.5 years before I got my gamified class to where I wanted it to be. I ran it for 3 more years, and then I had to come to my new district here in Fair Haven, and I started the whole system all over again because it was different clientele, different ages. And, somewhere in between all that, I realized that if you're gamifying and you're kind of doing this stuff in your classroom, there's never an endpoint. Like, the game's never over. I'm always reinventing and rethinking and jiggering and changing and reordering, all this stuff. And so if you have kind of like that growth mindset and you reframe failure as iteration, you just realize, it's actually fun for me now to rethink how to make the class better, how to make the game better. I spend a lot of my free time jotting down notes, and just, what I love is when the kids come and bring me suggestions. A lot of times, like with those achievements, things that they, wanted to be rewarded for, they're like, wouldn't it be cool if we got an achievement if we made our essays go viral? I was like, oh my, that's amazing. Yes. And then, well, but it was funny because it pushed me, going back to the technologies, infusing technology, allows teachers to be more and do more. And so I thought to myself, okay, well, how can I make an essay go viral? I'm having them handed in on paper. Well, I stopped giving paper essays and I had them start blogging. And instead of handing in essays, they had blogs that they shared with me. And then all of a sudden, I was pushing it out on my social media. They shared it on their social media. And we had a few posts, that would get 2, 3, 4,000 views because it was, kids were excited to write it. They had more of ownership of their writing, and they knew that there was a wider audience. So that meant that they were always going to do better when they know somebody beside their teacher is going to grade it. And to me, all of that stuff comes from just different ideas of gamification and not being afraid to reframe failure and constantly improving.
Definitely, and I love Chris is here just dropping value bombs left and right. So this is being a fantastic interview, and it's going to continue to be such. And Chris, precisely because you were talking about this blog and this achievement that you got for doing that, can you tell us a quick story as well about some success that you had, something that you would say you're proud of, something you want to show off to show off is a word, but I don't know, that you're really proud of and that you would like to talk about in this interview, related to gamification, of course.
Yeah. So, I think maybe one of the big takeaways when I talk about gamification and I try to convince people to at least consider some part of it. When a kid goes home and plays a video game, they are the chosen one. They have all the spells, all the weapons, all the trust. They are the only one that could save the world. However, in school, most of our kids, we don't even let them go to the bathroom without permission. And so I always kind of framed it and say it like the game trusts the kids, the game believes in the kids. We kind of got to do similar. And so I can point to a couple different stories throughout, my career, but they all go back to this idea that as I trust and believe in the kids. I think a lot of times teachers make their decisions based on their worst kid and what their worst kid is going to do, when I think we need to make our decision around our best kid and how we can elevate, their self-esteem by treating all of our kids as the best kids. And then you just manage the exceptions, the kids who don't fall in line. And I think since I kind of changed that mindset and I looked at the way a video game, tries to engage a player, that's the way I've tried to engage students. And just from the fact that I think that I believe them and I trust them and often kids will say, wait, I could do that. And I say, yeah, a lot of great things happen. I mean, when I was teaching high school English, we were doing a lot of, group work and stuff like that, and working in teams and a lot of presenting. And, because I believe whoever's doing the talking is doing the learning. So my kids were constantly presenting and updating on what their projects were. My kids got frustrated because our classroom did not meet their needs. I had a carpeted classroom and their chairs, didn't have wheels. So watching kids drag desks and just get frustrated that it was so hard to work together, that I actually came in one of the mornings and, a couple of the kids kind of said, we want to talk to you about something. And they went on this thing about, how they wanted to try to get a new classroom. They wanted to do like a classroom makeover, and they had this whole idea about how they were going to do it. And I said, yeah, let's do it. And so I think, I maybe took 3 hours out of the week, out of like maybe the month. And we filmed like this little commercial, and the kids, made it fun and interesting. And they wound up getting a sponsorship from KI Furniture, and they completely came in and redid our classroom. And that had nothing to do with me. That wasn't even something I had ever thought about, but it was something, I guess, through gamification and the way that I treat them and I think about my kids, empowered them to do so. Because thinking through gamification, right, I think about the student experience more than anything. What is it like to be a kid in my classroom? Is it fun and exciting? Just like I'm sure game designers do. Is my game fun to play? Like, that's my number one question now is my classroom fun? Right. And, fun is a gateway to learning. And so I kind of took that attitude with me here with the little guys. And the reason why I run the businesses and I treat them like, real, like it's a real business, and we have business names and business cards. And, my kids will tell you, I'm a shareholder in FH Gizmos, or, I'm a product manager in FH Gizmos, which is our 6th grade business. There's a little bit more pride. There's a little bit more empowerment. And so in my 6th through 8th grade business classes, we've had some unbelievable clients. Last year, we fulfilled a manufacturing contract for Slack, the big communications company. This year, we have Skype. We're doing a marketing campaign for Skype to help them promote Skype in the classroom. In my seventh grade class, we work with professors from Rutgers and the Master Gardeners to, kind of play around with how technology can help grow, in different environments and in different ways, fruits and vegetables and herbs that, people can sustain themselves on. My eighth grade class, we have 12 local businesses that hire us to help grow their business. And my kids do social media marketing. My kids, I have one kid who's doing like a whole storage system for one of our local game shops. And I think if and entrepreneurship, number one, I think is a great way to, have kids solve problems. But number two is like the idea of we're running a real business. Like to me, that's part of gamification because I'm putting a narrative over top of what I have to teach. I could totally teach entrepreneurship and different math concepts with worksheets, or I could do pretend companies. But my kids make real products. They sell them for real money. They fulfill real orders that come from real people in our community. And it's, if you came in and saw, it's like a little company inside of a school. And kids love that. It's empowering. There's a story here. Daniel Pink said it's autonomy, mastery, and purpose, and entrepreneurship and the narrative of being, business owners and eighth graders starting their own business. That's all.
And you can add and you use it as well. Andrzej Marchevsky's RAMP, which is autonomy, mastery, and purpose, and also relatedness, because they're relating to each other and they're doing all these things together socially. Yeah,
I think when you look at video games and the classroom, they're not dissimilar, right? The video game has some type of content and then it's going to deliver it to you somehow, whether it delivers it to you by holding your hand while you attack rats in the sewer and then the world opens up and you can kind of go where you want, or it delivers, it's really just it's all delivering information. And video games are fantastic at delivering information. And so I have to deliver content and information to my students. I could do that with a textbook and worksheets, but, it doesn't ramp well.
In a very broad generalization, we could say that school in general, of course, not in your class, education in general, not in many of the classes that we've known, but mostly it's a very poorly designed game. But it is a game. It has feedback. It has relatedness. It has all these things. It has status. It has badges. It has points. It has all these things that games have. However, it was not designed as such, and it was maybe not thought through those lens. So it's time to think about it that way.
100%. And it's so funny you say that is because I tell stories, especially when I taught high school, that like I'm a habitual B student. I could get a B on anything. However, I would always take that extra step to go talk to the professors at college and go get to know them. And I would basically charm my way into an A. And so that was all part of the game for me. In my eyes, when I was given a grade, like that was the opening salvo of negotiations. And so it really was just a game. How can I game the system? And I think if we started to think about school as the game that it is, where you complete a task and you're rewarded points, just like in a video game, like maybe we could design it way better. I know that I designed the content that I give students. I design it like a video game level. It starts out holding hands with the onboarding and then it grows into something from there. So yeah, you're right on with that.
Something that we always like to have from our guests is if they follow any sort of process when creating gamification, especially for a classroom and for students. Do you have any sort of process, any sort of steps that you follow when you're creating these experiences for your students? Or how do you approach it if you say, well, I'm going to include it now, what do I do?
Sure. So, I always fall back to design thinking. I'm a huge design thinking fan. In Silicon Valley, they call it like the user experience. It's all like everyone's talked about the same thing. But like I mentioned before, the place I always start was, what is it like to be a kid in my class? And I put myself in their shoes. Would I want to do this assignment? Is it allowing me to be creative and use, my personality and my expertise and my passion to complete this project or complete this lesson? And then I constantly get feedback from my kids. My kids do surveys. I'll let my kids do anonymous surveys, or I'll have them come talk to me, at the end of a unit or a marking period and face to face. And I'll say, what are you thinking about this class? I constantly think, would somebody buy this class if I was selling it? So it always starts to me with a play, a student experience. And from there, I try to craft, I as a teacher, you got to jam a lot of stuff in through the year. So I try to take, the stuff I have to teach, and then I try to put like that layer of fun and passion and interest and entertainment that allows a kid to, tap into something that speaks to them. And then the other big part is just feedback loops. Is I'm not afraid to change a project even in between classes. So I'll assign, something to a class, and I'll realize by the end, like, you know what, I don't really like that. And I'll change it before the next class even walks in. And then I'll go back and apologize to that first class and say, guys, you know what, I kind of actually came up with a tweak on this I want to put in. So I think not being afraid to iterate as quickly as humanly possible. I'll talk to some teachers who are like, oh, I only, change or update my class once a year, or maybe, every marking period. I change things almost like on a daily basis. Even if it had to be like on a minute by minute basis, I'm not afraid to change things to make them better. And when you start to get into that mindset, you go through so many iterations that within a week or, a month, you have 2 or 3 years worth of iterations put into your classroom, whether it's lessons or using gamification or, anything like that.
Especially because you have like several opportunities that maybe not everybody has. But
Right.
Since you have several opportunities, it's an immediate feedback. And I just wanted to throw out a warning. It's good to be able and willing to change things immediately. However, if you set out some rules to your students, I don't know how do you handle this, and I would like your thoughts as well. But in general, if you're going to, when you set out some rules, changing them is a very complex process if you
Right.
set out some specific rules. So if you're going to from one class to the other, maybe they didn't have the rules that the other class had, so it's like a safe place there. But if you're within an activity, especially when it involves grading, because students can get very nervous about grading, you have to be careful about changing the rules. So what are your thoughts on that, Chris?
I think I'll push back a little bit, because you are correct that changing the rules is a very complex system. But part of apologizing, besides modeling for the kids, it's okay to make mistakes, and it's really not that big of a deal most of the time. The other thing it does is really uncomplicate things for me. And I basically tell the kids, guys, I made a mistake, or what, I made a poor decision. I don't like the way that is. I feel like people are much more forgiving when the rules change in a transparent way than if you change them and maybe kind of, I don't want to say be sneaky about it, but like you're not.
Yeah, definitely.
And so really it comes down to me, would I rather play a game that has bad rules and have to play the game to the end? Or would I rather start a game that has bad rules and then all of a sudden like the rules change because there's an acknowledgement that the rules are bad? Like I'm in the second camp. Like I rather, like, if I'm, if things are going wrong and somebody steps up and says, hey, look, I know these were the rules, but like they were bad, and here's the new rules, and we're going to kind of, everyone's going to be still, held to those. I'm okay with that. You know what I mean? It's I don't, and again, that could be me personality wise. That could be how I translate it to my kids. But I've always had a lot more success when I was open and honest about having to change something, rather than like I mean, I've had kids call me out and be like, Aviles, this is like a stupid idea. Like, that's a dumb rule, or why can't I do that? And I'll just go, hey, you know what? You're right. Why can't you do that? Guys, we need to make a change. Here's why. My bad. Restart.
To close up the subject, but there's another set of rules that you do have there and that are not changing, and those are the meta rules that you're establishing from the start, that the rules can change and that there can be improvements. So if you have those meta rules as well, you're making the students comfortable in the situation of constant change. So that's part. I mean, there's always a set of different levels of rules, and if you set that rule from the start, it's definitely. I mean, I completely agree with you, Chris. Definitely, especially because you've set them into that mindset. And the meta rule is the rules might change, but they will change for the better, or at least we're striving for that. And you can call me out. So all those things together make your these kinds of decisions very successful, as it seems in your classroom.
Oh, I like that. I never thought about it like that. Learned something new.
Just a quick break before we continue with this episode. If you've been enjoying this podcast, I would really appreciate if you share it with your friends and family and on social media. On Twitter and Instagram, it's @RobAlvarezB and the hashtag ProfessorGame, all one word. And in Facebook, you can find the Professor Game page. Thanks in advance for your engagement. So, Chris, now we're going to move into what we like to call the second part of this interview, where we, instead of going for the story, we're going for some quick answers. And the first thing that we would like to know is if there's anything, any element or any best practice, you can call it, that you feel any gamification of a classroom or of a student experience could benefit from.
Two things. Number one is gamify attendance. I've had a lot of success, and there's a lot of research to back that if you gamify attendance, your kids will show up more. And number two is every teacher who's using kind of like that achievement system I mentioned, where you reward kids for heroic deeds and heroic traits, make an achievement that anytime a kid gives a presentation and does not use PowerPoint or Google Slides, that they can earn that achievement. Because I added that and totally changed my teaching career. Because when kids couldn't do PowerPoints, they started to bring in all these different ways to show what they've learned. Screencasting, book trailers. That's how I started with Minecraft back in the day. As I had a kid build Romeo and Juliet, Globe Theater in Minecraft. So I think those two things.
What do you mean by gamifying the attendance?
So what I used to do is I put my kids into guilds. And so if an individual student showed up that day, they turned 10 AP. And so in the gamification system I use, 10 AP achievement points, they're used to buy things from the class store. And so 10 AP if the kid shows up, 25 AP if their whole guild shows up, and then the whole class got 50 AP if every kid was in there. And I actually tracked attendance over the last few years, and my kids showed up to school 20% more than other kids in a non-gamified class in my high school. And that's because we suffered from, it was a very tough high school, and we had a lot of issues with absenteeism. But I found that by gamifying attendance and just rewarding kids and being excited that they showed up, they were more likely to show up more.
Exciting. So it's something to implement if you feel that could benefit your class, because if you have a certain, maybe not an issue, but if you want to increase or reduce your absenteeism, it would be a great strategy. Mm-hmm. And Chris, what would you say is your favorite game?
Anything from the Fallout series, and I play Overwatch quite a bit.
Fantastic. Is there? I don't know if you've heard the previous interviews. We've had 50-something episodes by now. But is there somebody that you either haven't heard or maybe would like to listen to in an episode like this one in Professor Game?
I'm not going to necessarily give you a person. You have hit my radar recently, and I'm going through your back catalog, and I'm just blown away, by the amazing experts that you have. So I haven't gotten through everything.
Thank you very much for that.
I'm on episode 10 or 11. But I'll tell you the type of person I would love you to talk to. I am obsessed with alternate reality games. If I was not a teacher, I would start an alternate reality game company. And so I've always wanted to hear from somebody who works at like a company called like 1031. They put on like these big, alternate reality type events or promotions for video games or recording artists. Or even going back to like one of the first ones, I Heart Bees, which was the alternate reality game that introduced Halo. And that's Jane McGonigal was part of that crew. I would love to talk to somebody who has done alternate reality games on a large scale, because I just think they are the coolest form of entertainment. And I think they're only going to get more and more popular, as augmented reality becomes a thing.
Beautiful. So maybe we could sneak in Jane McGonigal, who has been a previous suggestion as well.
Yeah, that'd be really cool. I'd love to, talk to her, not just about the work she does, but that previous work she did on the I Love Bees alternate reality game. If you haven't seen or, kind of researched into what that alternate reality game was, it was awesome.
Sounds very cool. I'll try to sneak in some time to look at that as well. Is there any book, Chris, in that same vein that you would like to recommend to the engagers? Think of teachers like yourself who had maybe never thought of gamification or haven't still dared of using gamification. Would you recommend something to them?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Mike Matera, who's another educator. He's got a great book out that's enjoyable. Matt Farber is a professor at, I think, University of Colorado now. He's got a couple books out. But I would more suggest just reading a diverse range of authors, because everybody's version of gamification is very different. And so I always try to walk away from reading a book about gamification or game-based learning. I always try to walk away with a couple things that I can implement and add to what I do. So I mean, those two guys are two standout authors I always enjoy reading. But I also try to get my hands on everything, even as an educator going into the business world and seeing how they do things. Kevin Werbach from University of Pennsylvania is a friend of mine, and I always enjoy his work that he does in the business world with gamification. So I think just drawing on inspiration from a variety of authors and fields is only going to make your version of gamification better.
Definitely. So, Chris, what would you say is your superpower when creating gamification in the classroom?
I am relentless. Adding gamification is not something that teachers get paid extra for. It's not something they have to do to catch a paycheck. And when you're gamifying, especially just starting out, it could become frustrating and overwhelming. To be able to stick to a system for a school year, it takes a lot. And so if I had a superpower, it's just the fact that I'm relentless. I'm not the best at anything. I'm not super talented at anything, but I can outwork pretty much anybody. And so just consistently making things better and not quitting is probably one of my strongest personality traits.
Okay, that sounds like a superpower, definitely. And Chris, we're arriving to this sort of gamified kind of question because we don't know what the question is going to be. We're going to pick it randomly, and here we have this one. Okay, this looks interesting, and it makes sense for you, I think.
Okay.
This person is asking, would it be possible to design games in some or all areas to teach in schools? And has like a sub-question as well of asking if this could be included in textbooks that are used in schools. What do you think? What's your stab at this?
So I 100% think that you can gamify any class. I've been very lucky to work with, probably a couple hundred teachers over the course of the last 7 years, whether it's just answering questions in email or giving presentations or, the odd school district that will bring me in and help me, have them gamify a department. But even if you look at in the States, in New York, we have a school, I guess I'll call them a school district. I don't know if that counts. But I think it's a private school district. They're called Quest to Learn. And the entire school is gamified. And it's presented through questing. And there's a lot of game mechanics that they use. So 100%, going from high school English to technology, going from, older kids to, the younger kids I have now. And knowing who I've worked with, I haven't come across a situation or a system, even when I've worked with teachers that have a lot of technology and technology know-how, and I've worked with teachers that have no technology or no technology know-how, and we've always come away successful. So I definitely think you can gamify any class. I think you can gamify an entire school. I think gamifying a textbook would be a challenge. That I'd have to wrap my head around is how would you present probably the most boring form of education. How would you try to liven that up with gamification?
The first thing that came to my mind when I read the textbook part was read your own adventure kind of books.
Yeah.
Like the quick, that's like the quick, sort of not easy, but sort of quick and easy thing to think of. But it is interesting to think of, because I'm guessing that this person might be thinking of something around, because the textbooks is the typical thing that you see in every school. So you can kind of standardize using gamification if the textbook that is assigned to a full district or a state or whatever is gamified already.
Yeah, or I mean, I'm even thinking, so like my mind, the closer you can get to like role playing and making things like reality or alternate reality, I always find to be the most engaging. So like even like a choose your own adventure, I wonder, can like you reframe a textbook as almost like a Dungeons and Dragons type of thing, where you take on the role of a character and you roll some dice and the book walks you through an educational type of story. I don't know, but that would be tough. I mean, I think maybe instead of gamifying the textbook, we should just burn them all.
That's an alternative always.
Yeah, maybe we'll just start there.
And change the whole thing.
Yeah.
So, Chris, we're arriving to the end of the interview. Is there any final advice that you would like to give to the engagers?
I think just going back and the 2 or 3 things I always like to try to stress is put yourselves in your player's shoes, build quickly, and don't be afraid to rebuild. And then I think if you approach everything that you're doing from the perspective of your best kid on your best day and your best lesson, rather than trying to plan for your worst kid or your least favorite lesson, stuff like that. I think if you approach it with the right attitude and you're willing to commit to an extended period of testing, I think you can be successful at gamification. Just think about your kids, build quickly, rebuild often, come at it from a positive, this is going to work perspective, and commit yourself to one lesson or one marking period or 1 year before you throw in the towel and give up.
This is going to work because we're going to make it work, is the only thing I would add to that. I certainly agree with that final advice. Well, Chris, let us know, how can we connect with you if the audience wants to get any more of Chris? You have a webpage? Do you have social media? Where can we maybe ask you more questions?
My social media, my blog is all under the same name. It's Teched Up Teacher, TECHED Up Teacher. That's my Instagram, my Twitter, my Facebook, and that is my blog. That's my email, chrisaviles@techedupteacher.com. And as always, I'm always super stoked to connect with anybody who wants to talk gamification.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for all your words, all your wisdom, all your experience that you have spilled, all those value bombs you've been dropping left and right during this interview. But now it's time to say it's game over, Chris, I'm afraid.
Well, thank you. I am super excited to have been here, and I am loving working through the back catalog. And you have a new fan, so
thank you. I really take that to heart. Thank you, Chris.
You got it.
Hey Engagers, thank you for listening to Professor Game Podcast. If you want more details of this interview with Chris, go to professorgame.com/podcast/053. There you can also subscribe, and that way we can be in contact and you will have exclusive access to opportunities that Professor Game might have for you. And have you realized that we are just about to hit the 1-year mark? Yes, we are. So the next episode, we're going to have a special anniversary episode. If you would like to listen to that, subscribe using your favorite podcast app and listen to the next episode of Professor Game. See you there.